Hello and welcome back. Now there's a lot of guys that I've talked about on this channel dominating in fantasy at one point or another, but I've been disrespecting Sam Reinhart for far too long. 11 goals in his last 9 games, tied for second in the NHL in goals with Kucherov at 28, a crazy plus 17, and oh yeah, are you in a face-off league because he's also dual eligible and takes between 5 and 7 face-offs per game. Just picked up the hat trick on Saturday night against Colorado in a barn burner where goaltending was optional, and he was drafted around ADP 97 in drafts this year, so huge value if you picked him in the draft. But he's 96% owned in this video. We're going to do what we always do and find you some guys to stream this week, look at the schedule, find some trending players and some goaltending options as well. So let's jump right into the schedule. 50 games this week, usual light nights, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, an unusually heavy Saturday night that features every single team, and I'm not sure if ESPN's going to do that Frozen Frenzy thing, but for fantasy, you'll have a bunch of guys that you can't get into your lineup, and if any of them are waiver type guys, you should definitely drop them for some lighter night players, and fortunately, 3 teams play 4 games this week and have 3 light nights, and you're looking at Philadelphia, Dallas, and Minnesota. We'll look at each one of those teams in detail in a couple of seconds, but if you want to max out games played, you could pick up someone from the Monday-Tuesday back-to-backs, which you're looking at Boston and Vancouver. They both play on Monday and Tuesday back-to-back. Then you drop that player or 2 or whatever on Wednesday morning and pick up somebody from Montreal and Vegas. They play a Wednesday-Thursday back-to-back. And then on Friday morning, you drop that player and pick up somebody from either a Friday-Saturday back-to-back or a Saturday-Sunday back-to-back, and there's a couple of options here. Toronto, New York plays Washington back-to-back, home and home on Saturday-Sunday, and there are a couple of options for you there. So that would be the main way to maximize your games played this week, but we do have a couple of good schedules to touch on, and let's jump right into the best schedule this week, and that is the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, there are a bunch of options you could go to. Tyson Foerster is a guy in deeper leagues where you're looking for lower ownership percentage, but still pretty decent peripherals, shots, etc. He pops off every now and then for some goals. You have Owen Tippett, who I believe is 54% owned. He's been a little bit cold in terms of offensive production, but he shoots a ton, so he's another option for you. But the guys I'm focusing on here, number 1 is Joel Farabee, 21% owned, 9 points in his last 7 games. Very assist heavy, but he has been doing it for even longer than that 7-game stretch. 3 goals, 10 assists, 13 points in his last 13 games. And he's a single position left winger, so that does hurt a little bit in terms of roster flexibility, but he does play those 3 light nights, so you probably won't care. There are a couple of opportunities here for some goals. You have this game against Montreal. You probably have Fleury in this game. Pittsburgh's been playing pretty well lately, and they have really good goaltending, so maybe not the best matchup there, but it is the matchup of Pennsylvania, so that could be a very intense game. Farabee, I believe, is playing top 6, getting a little bit of power play time lately. And he's one of the guys that you can own. You can see Travis Konechny here. He's 89% owned. He would be one of the better guys to own for this week, but obviously he's owned up. So you can get access to some of those guys through some of these guys in terms of Joel Farabee. You also have Travis Sanheim, who I don't know if he's actually been taken off PP1. Daily Faceoff is listing Igor Zamula on PP1. I don't know if that's true because Sanheim has been doing it for a while. Cam York has gotten some power play time. He just got lit up the other game. Who knows if he'll be in going forward for this week, but Sanheim has been one of those consistent guys with peripherals, shots, hits, and blocks a little bit here and there. Sanheim, no points in his last 4 games, so he could potentially break out soon, considering he's got 7 points in his last 12. So usually good for some assists and some shot volume and some blocks. He's only 55% owned, so if he is a power play quarterback, he's one of the rare ones that you can find on the waiver wire in a 12-team league. And then last but not least, we do have to talk about Philly's goaltending, as the Flyers are, I believe, tied for 6th or something. They're top 5 season long in terms of expected goals against per game. Have to double check the math on that, but 26% owned for Sam Ersson, and he's been outplaying Carter Hart. So 922 save percentage last month for Ersson. Compare that to Hart at a 901 save percentage. Only 4 wins in those 8 games that you see on the screen there, but a 2.17 goals against in that 922 save percentage is really nice, especially if you're in a categories league and you're looking for that guy that you can pick up on a night where they're playing a back-to-back, like here at the tail end of the week, and you can grab Ersson and usually be confident that he's not going to give up a ton. The Flyers have been really good defensively this season. So these would be some of the better options. Again, there are some other guys you can go to that are a little higher ownership percentage, but these are the guys I've got my eye on for the upcoming week. But there's also a couple of other guys that we do have to talk about from Dallas. So Miro Heiskanen week to week with an injury, that bumps Thomas Harley up to PP1. He's got 4 points in his last 6 games, 9 points in his last 13, and only 1 power play point, which actually could improve going forward as he starts to get a little bit more power play time. Also kind of want to mention Niels Lundqvist, 3 assists in his last 4 games. He's usually a power play guy, maybe gets some PP2 time with this injury to Heiskanen, but Harley only 31% owned would be your better option between the two of them. And again, 9 points in his last 13 is pretty good for a younger defenseman who's now going to step into a better role. Another guy that you definitely want to keep your eye on is Mason Marchment, 26% owned left wing, 9 points in his last 6 games, 3 goals, 6 assists. He's 90th percentile on the season in points per game, 86th in goals, 88th in assists, 2 shots per game, so not crazy high, but kind of enough there to keep you, wherever you need the peripherals, you're getting a little bit of that from Marchment. Used to be a big hitter, not as much this year, but he is getting a little bit of power play time, and he has been red hot the last 6 games. But there are a couple of other guys that he's playing with that are also red hot. You have Tyler Seguin, 40% owned, center right wing. Dual position eligibility may be another factor, but again, these are all light night games in the beginning of the week, so maybe not the most important thing. 4 goals, 2 assists, 6 points in his last 4 games for Seguin, and he usually is a shot volume guy as well. And then you also have Matt Duchene, 69% owned, a little bit higher owned this year. He's been kind of a nice surprise there on the third line for Dallas, 6 assists in a 4-game point streak, and he is also dual eligible. So these are some guys that you definitely want to pay attention to. They do play Minnesota in this home and home on Monday and Wednesday. Then they've got this game against Nashville, and then a really nice favorable game against Chicago. I believe that's the Saturday. So even if you're going to try to pick these guys up and you're going to have a logjam on your roster on Saturday, they do have a good matchup on Saturday, so maybe these guys get into your lineup. Now, last but not least, we do have to talk about Minnesota, and there are a couple of guys that you can get some value out of right now. Mojo, Marcus Johansson, 4% owned, so he's there for you in almost every league size. Single position left winger. He's second line right now with Joel Eriksson Ek and Ryan Hartman, and he's getting some power play time, PP2. 3 goals, 3 assists, 2 power play points in his last 6 games, was really nice for a guy who's only 4% owned. Then you also have Brock Faber, and this has been a story all season long. He's been jumping in and getting some power play time and playing a ton of minutes. He's averaging more than 24 minutes per game. He was up to 30 plus last game, had 3 assists and 2 power play points in that game, and that's coming with an injury to Jared Spurgeon, who's out yet again. So there's been times this season where they had Spurgeon out, Brodin out, both of them at the same time. Spurgeon has gone out again, so now Brock Faber is going to be relied upon for that power play one time, and he's only 24% owned, so he might be the best option if you're looking for some power play points. If you're in a points league that weights those a little bit heavier, this would probably be a really good defensive pickup this week. Now you also have Ryan Hartman, dual eligible, 17% owned, 4 points in his last 6 games. Not the most crazy numbers, and he's had better numbers in the past playing with Kaprizov and Zuccarello on that top line. But it is still noteworthy that he will feature in our trending players section, who's improved from week to week over the last 3 weeks. So slight improvement each week from Ryan Hartman, and he's only 17% owned with that dual position eligibility, so that is kind of nice for you. And then these are Ducks guys. This was the same slide that I used for the Ducks last week, so ignore those 2 guys down at the bottom. But now we're going to turn our attention to the goaltenders and give them a little bit of time here. And we'll start with some of the guys that we definitely have to pay attention to, and that is Joey Daccord, one of the better starters that you can find right now. So one of the things we have to note with Daccord is he's playing for Seattle, who since December 17th lead the NHL in goals against per game at 1.43. A lot of that has to do with Daccord, but they are playing really well defensively. You can see a 5-game winning streak, 992 goals against, 970 save percentage, and a shutout in that span for Daccord. He is 68% owned, which is relatively high, but if he's available for whatever reason in your league, definitely go out and grab him. He's one of the starters that you can find kind of on the waiver wire. These top 3 guys here we'll talk about are kind of the only starters that we can really look at right now who are maybe ownable in your league depending on your league size. But Daccord has been really good. That team defense exposure, 91st percentile there, 922 save percentage, 2.3 goals against, and 10 wins on the season. He's 3.9 above expected, so really good numbers for Joey Decord. And as we take a look at a Seattle Kraken goaltender, we can also take a look at a former Seattle Kraken goaltender in Martin Jones. He's now the #1 guy for Toronto, as they've been having a number of issues trying to find some goaltending, and they seem to have found their guy in Martin Jones. 3 wins in his last 4 games, about 1 goal against per game, .962 save percentage, and a shutout in that span. Toronto's not the best defensively, but he is very significantly above expected, 10.4 above expected. And then you can see here, .932 save percentage, 2.1 goals against for Martin Jones. He's a must-add if you're looking for a starter. 62% owned. He might not be there for you again, but if he is there, you definitely want to pick him up. And then another guy, similar situation, but this time a little bit better of a defensive team, and that is Pyotr Kochetkov. Now, that stat that I just gave you out, since December 17th, goals against per game, Carolina is 4th in the NHL at 2.1. So they've been really good defensively. They've been playing much better hockey lately, and they're getting the wins. They're getting the offensive support from Aho and Svechnikov, who've been ballistic the last couple of weeks. But you can see that team defense, 97th percentile. He is a little bit below expected because that's when he plays terrible games. Like, he's really bad. So 600, 700 save percentage when he loses games, but that hasn't happened as he's won 4 in a row, and he's got a 175 goals against and a .930 save percentage in that 4-game stretch. So he's been much better lately. That's going to improve his save percentage, and the goals against is still really good because of this team exposure. So you're getting decent numbers there, you're getting wins, and you're getting that team exposure. If he can continue to play like this with the increasing save percentage and the goals saved above expected climbing, this would be a really nice pickup. If you've held on to him for a couple weeks now, you're reaping the benefits finally. Now, speaking of guys that were playing on good defensive teams, we mentioned Sam Ersson earlier, and this is why you would own him. Again, some of this save percentage is brought down by his play earlier in the season, but he's played much better lately. 4 wins in his last 8 games, .922 save percentage in that stretch, and they are a really good defensive team, 82nd percentile there, and the goals against will follow because of that, 2.5 goals against. And we mentioned they do have a back-to-back towards the end of the week, so he will get at least 1 game next week. But if you're looking for another guy to stream, this has been a consistent trend, another one of those teams. So the past number of weeks, Winnipeg has been one of the best defensive teams in the entire NHL, and Hellebuck has been one of the guys who's been reaping the benefits of that. This doesn't necessarily show. This is expected goals against, so they're getting goaltending from both guys way above expected, 16.2 above expected for Hellebuck. But you're also looking at Brassois, who has been a really serviceable backup during this trend where they're getting that team defense. If I can just pull up his name here. But you're looking at 3 wins in his last 3 starts, 1.66 goals against, and .942 save percentage in that stretch, .920 save percentage on the year, 2.3 goals against. So that's really good numbers for a backup. If he's ever going to get in any of these games this week, you're definitely going to want to stream him. He's been one of the more consistent streamers for the last month or so because of that. Now, another guy who's been a really consistent streamer is Alex Lyon. He's playing today, which we don't have the stats for because that game starts at 8 p.m. and I'm recording this earlier than that. But he's been really good. 3 wins in his last 4 starts, and they have a back-to-back Saturday against LA and then Sunday against Toronto. So he will probably get one of those games. He might be taking the starting job considering how well he's played, but even if he's not, he will probably get one of those starts on the weekend. So that is something to monitor. On the season, .919 save percentage, 2.6 goals against, 3.8 goals saved above expected. So he's been very good, very skilled, despite not the best team defense in front of him. But this is one of those guys that you can still find on the wire at 46% ownership. And then, surprisingly, we do have a couple of Montreal guys to talk about, not because of the team defense, but because of the way that these goaltenders are playing. Sam Montembeault, .906 save percentage, 2.9 goals against on the year, but he's been really good lately. Put up a really great game against the Rangers on Saturday night. And he is above expected, and that is kind of crazy considering the team defense in front of him, 18th percentile there. And then you also have Jake Allen, who isn't necessarily the best option. His numbers haven't been great over the past couple of games, but he is one of those guys that can get hot, and he is slightly above expected despite this 900 save percentage and the 3.6 goals against. Not a lot of wins on the season, and he's not getting a lot of starts because of that. So Montembeault would probably be your best option, but they do have that back-to-back against Philly against Philly Wednesday, and then against San Jose on Thursday. So you're going to want to pick up whoever's playing in that San Jose game, as that should be a relatively easy win. San Jose's back to being terrible again. So just a couple of goaltenders to look at as we transition now into the trending players from the past couple of weeks. Now, this is something I've used for the last 2 weeks, and I guess we'll keep it going. It is very difficult to put together, and it's not easy to make sure all the data matches. So this is kind of just like an ad hoc throw together thing, but we can take a look at some of the trends here. And you can see at the top that these are the top scoring leaders since December 17th. 22 points in 10 games for McKinnon, 20 in 10 for Aho. The usual suspects, Kucherov, Kaprizov, Svech, McDavid, etc. But you can see down here, these are players in this table that have improved each of the last 3 weeks, I should say, from the week of the 24th to the week of the 31st, and then from then until this present week. Each, the player would have had to improve each of those weeks, and that would be what comprises this table down at the bottom. And we can look at this, we're sorting this by total change, and there are a number of guys. Svechnikov is one of those guys that's just been absolutely killing it. And you can see here, 15 points in his last 9 games, going from a 71 to an 82. But a lot of these guys, Svech included, is 89% owned, so he's not available for you. So we can filter this out and find some guys who may be available for you on your waiver wire, and we'll take a look at a couple of these right now. So we'll start it off with Jake DeBrusk. He's been one of those guys that gets hot every now and then, and now seems to be one of those times. 4 goals, 4 assists, 8 points in his last 6 games, 3 of those coming on the power play. So he's gone from a 53 up to almost a 70 at a 69. For Jake DeBrusk, 44% owned, so he is a little bit higher owned than some of these other guys, but right now he's been very productive, and the Bruins just put up 7 the other night, and he was factoring in on a couple of those. So Jake DeBrusk is one of those guys who was really good last year, hasn't quite found it this year, but he has found it lately, so you could get out in front of that. They do have a 4-game week this week. Now, we also have Jack Quinn here. Now, he's been absent for a lot of these times, so he doesn't necessarily meet the criteria, but I did want to mention him anyway because he's got 4 goals, 1 assist, 5 points in his last 7 games, and they've reunited that Cousins-Quinn-Peterka line, which was so good last year. So you can see here he's improved about 11 spots from where he was preseason up to a 58.9. He's only 5% owned, so if he's available for you, he's a goal scorer. If you're looking for goals, if you're in a league that weights that a little bit heavier, he's a guy that you can find in most league sizes, and he's been very productive in limited time this year. Now, another guy coming off of injury, Ricard Raquel, going from a 56 to a 68. He's got 4 goals, 4 assists, 8 points in his last 8 games, and he's riding shotgun in the top 6 with guys like Crosby or Malkin, depending on how they want to factor that in. It is getting a little bit of power play time, but not necessarily the guy on that top power play unit. So this is one of those guys that has been a shot volume guy in the past. Hasn't necessarily followed him this year, but this could be an opportunity now that he's healthy where he starts to put up that shot volume, and he is a goal scorer, so 4 goals in his last 8 games is nice as well. Up next, we've got Sandin, and another, he's really low. You can't even see him on the graph here, who's below a 50. Now he's up to a 57. This cutoff was a 50 completeness rating. I didn't want to have anybody too low because those guys are usually in and out of the lineup or depth guys. This is kind of a nice cutoff to find that, and this is an interesting way to look at Sandin as he's come from below that threshold up above that threshold on the back of a 5-assist stretch in his last 5 games. So Sandin used to be the power play guy with Carlson out. With Carlson back, he's not getting that power play time, so he's a little bit less valuable. But at 16% owned, he is a guy that can get some offense going. It's just a trend this year. Washington has not been able to score a lot, so that is something to take note of. Now, Trent Frederick is another guy on Boston that has a 4-game week this week that you could find in pretty much every league size at 6% owned, and he's been climbing up there, 54 up to a 64 over the last couple of weeks. 5 goals, 1 assist in his last 4 games, and 6 hits. And before that, he had a 6-hit game. So he's usually a hitter. Now he's factored in some offense, and this would be a great time to pick him up as they do have a 4-game week. Same thing with Freddie Gaudreau. He's usually a peripherals guy. He's just climbing above 50 right now, so he meets the threshold. But he's been one of those guys that's been a little bit harder to own. He's only 1% owned for that reason. He's not necessarily a top 6 guy. He's a middle 6 guy, so this is a much deeper league play. But if you're looking for a deeper league play that might be a little bit better for you, that is Pavel Dorofeyev. 3 goals, 1 assist in his last 5 games. He's a goal scorer. Maybe not the best shot volume, but he should be getting a little bit of an option on the power play. Power play 2, I would imagine, but 0% owned means nobody's paying attention to him right now, and he is relatively hot. So if you're in a really deep league, that could be a nice play for you. If you're in a really shallow league, you could look at Gustav Forsling. The Panthers have been on fire lately. They put up 8 the other night against Colorado. Forsling, 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points in his last 7 games. He is 63% owned, but he is relatively complete at a 69. So this is a guy who was getting it done earlier in the year with the injuries on the blue line, but he's still getting it done now that those guys are back. Weegar hasn't necessarily popped off yet. Ekblad slowly but surely getting back into form, but Forsling has been pretty consistent all season long, and he's been improving the last couple of weeks significantly enough to get to a 69. Another guy I wanted to talk about, Jonathan Drouin, not eligible for this before at a 48 and a 50, but now up to a 55 on the back of a 5-goal, 2-assist, 7-point stretch in his last 6 games. Really nice goal the other night against Florida, who we just talked about. Drouin has not really been a goal scorer at all in the last number of years. He did have some problems upper body-wise that limited his shot, and he wasn't able to shoot that well when he was playing for Montreal. But it looks like he's kind of gotten that back a little bit. He scored a really nice goal the other night. He's been getting some goal production lately. 5 goals in the last 6 games is really kind of uncharacteristic for him, but it is nice to see. And he's only 22% owned, so he probably is there for you. But another guy we got to talk about with a 4-game week, Morgan Geekie, another Boston Bruin. We didn't necessarily feature them in this video. We could have easily featured all 3 of these guys, but we're talking about them now. Geekie, 4 goals, 3 assists, 7 points in his last 7 games, and he's been steadily climbing. Then we also have Sam Bennett. He's been climbing the same type of way. 4 points in his last 4 games, and he is day-to-day right now, so that is something to monitor, but he's only 17% owned, and he does get some hits in there as well. He just hasn't been able to piece it all together this year the way that he did last season, so he hasn't gone off yet. Maybe now's the time to get out in front of it and pick him up while he's only 17% owned. Now, speaking of that Panthers-Avalanche game the other night, Josh Manson, really good the last number of games. He's got 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points, and 24 hits in his last 7 games. So a peripheral type of defenseman that's now started to add in some offense, which is really nice. He's up to a 63. Not going to get you a ton of shot volume, not going to get you a lot of offensive production in general, but it has been coming lately. So that is really nice to see. And then one other guy I want to touch on really quick, Tyler Bertuzzi. This is a 4-game week for Toronto, and I didn't really mention any of Toronto's guys because there's not a lot of depth guys in Toronto that you want to own, but it is worth mentioning Bertuzzi has 4 assists in his last 3 games, and he's been one of those top 6 guys playing with the big dogs in Toronto. Now, he hasn't gotten it done up till this point in the season in terms of, people were hyping him up very high coming into the season, but now could be a time at 19% ownership to get out in front of it and maybe hope that he puts together a really nice second half of the season. He was a really good playoff player last year, so maybe now that the games mean a little bit more, he's going to be more of a factor. There's a number of other guys on this list. We mentioned Thomas Harley. There's some other guys. Blake Coleman has 9 points in his last 8 games. He's up to a 75. He's been really consistent. Sharon Govich, I streamed this for Sunday, actually Friday and Sunday, and he's not necessarily been the most consistent player, but when he goes off, he does go off pretty well. Here's Joel Farabee, who we also talked about in this video, 10 points in his last 9, and a couple of these other guys. I do want to mention Robbie Fabry. He's hot and cold. When he gets hot, he gets really hot, and he does have a couple of points in his last couple of games. I don't have it off the top of my head, but only 2% ownership. But yeah, we're not going to go through everybody. That's going to do it for the trending players. You can get access to this if you want. The Patreon link in the description below. This is now up on the Patreon page where I post everything, so you can get access to this and play around with it yourself. Find some guys that you need for your waiver wire pickups this week. But that's going to do it for this one. Thank you for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.